Hey guys, what's up? So in this video, we're going to look at forms and how they can allow us to collect data from users via prompting them. We're going to look at a very interesting way that Django provides that can allow us to basically create classes that will help us to render forms in HTML. So we're going to do this using our models, but at first we're going to look at how we can create a form without using our existing model. So the first thing I'm going to do is to head over to our posts app. So I actually changed most of the code right here because I had issues with my machine and I had to reinstall my Linux. But I'm going to make sure I keep everything as simple as possible. So the first thing we're going to do is to go and create a view that's simply going to render an HTML template. In that HTML template, we shall have a simple form that will allow us to create a post. So what I'm going to do is to create that view function. So I'm going to close some of this and I'll head over to views.py. I actually created most of the view functions from scratch. So I'm just going to simply create another view function. I'm just going to call this create post. It's going to take in a request and then it's going to return an HTML template. So in this case, we're going to say return render. Then we shall have our request object, and then we shall provide some sort of context. Now in this case, we're going to provide a context, sorry for that. And this context is just going to simply be an empty dictionary for now. So I'm just going to add this context right here. And after creating this context, I'm going to go ahead and create our form. So just like I explained, Django allows us to create our forms as classes. Then those classes can help us to be able to render fields based on the descriptions we provided. So what I'll do is to create a new module within our posts app, and I'm going to call this a forms.py module. Now within this, I'm going to create our forms. So Django comes with its own app for forms. So like that, we can be able to import our forms. So I can say from Django, we are going to import, sorry for this. So we're just simply going to import our forms. And once you have these forms, you can go ahead and create a class that basically describes a form. So I'm just going to come right here. I'm just going to basically get most of our fields from our post model. So I'm just going to come and create a class. And this class is going to be a post creation form. So this is a post creation form and it's going to allow us to create a post. So I'm just going to come right here and call this a post creation form. Now this form is going to inherit from the form class within the forms package in Django. So I'll just come and say forms.form, and right after doing this, then I'm going to go ahead and describe some of the fields we want on this form. So I'll start with the title. So I'll say that our title is going to be equal to forms. So within the forms package, you can get access to the different classes that allow us to create fields. So for example, we can access the char field, and then here we can specify attributes such as the max length. Now we can even borrow the max length from our model. For example, we can have a max length of 225. So I can just come right here and say we're going to have a max length of, actually this is going to be 225. Now we're also going to have our content. So we can just come right here and say we're going to have a content. Now this content is going to be forms.char field. So we can even come here and specify a max length. So let's make this 500 for now. And now we can also go ahead and provide our author field. So I can come right here and say that we're going to have our author as forms dot, in this case it's going to be char field, and then we can even specify our max length. So within our author, we also specified our max length to be 255 characters. So I'll come and also provide that. I'll say our max length is going to be 255 characters. Now that we have our form, all we need to do is to provide this within our context. Then using that context, we're going to be able to render this form in a template. So what I'll do is to go back to our views.py, and then I'm going to add our form to our context. So I'll begin by importing it. So I'll come to the top here, and all I'll have to say is forms from within the current directory or the current package. I'm going to import our post creation form, and right after importing our post creation form, now each time we create a form class, we need to create an instance for it as long as we're going to render it in our template. So what I'll do is to come right here, I'll create a form, and this is actually going to be an instance of our post creation form. Right after creating this form, I'll just come within our context. Now I'm going to create a variable called form, and that will have a value of our form. So what I have here is each time we call this form within our template, we're actually going to be referring to our form. Before we render this, let's first go and look at how this form is. So I'm going to save this, and what I'll do is to actually first open up our shell. So we're going to first explore our forms from the high level, then we'll be able to understand how these forms really work. So I'll open up our Python shell. I'll start with Python 3 money.py and then shell. And right after that, we are now in our Python console, so we can be able to access our forms.py module. So what I'll do is to come and import it. So I'll say from, this is going to be from posts.forms. I am going to go ahead and import our post. It's actually going to be our post creation. Sorry for this. Form. And right after doing that, we are going to create a form instance. So I'll just come right here and say that our form is going to be our post creation form. Now, right after doing this, we have this form, but this form has specific properties that are important when we are submitting that form. We have the isBound property. So once we have this, actually this is actually an attribute. Once we call this, we can be able to see that form.isBound is false. Now form.isBound is simply an attribute that shows us whether our form has some values. So in this case, our form hasn't been populated with values. Now let's look at how we can populate this form with values. So let's say we created our form with values, and this is actually going to be our post creation. Sorry for that. And then it's going to be our post creation form. Now the way we can provide these values is by creating a dictionary of values. So in this case, we can provide our values such as that. So let's go to our forms.py right here. And within our forms.py, let me actually close our terminal. And when I go back to our forms.py right here, what we have is 3 different fields. Now, the way we can populate our form with values is by creating a dictionary that has these keys as the fields that we've created on our form. So each of the attributes of this class is a field onto our form, and when we are populating our form with values, we use these to basically use them as keys and then provide values. So what we're going to do is to pull up our terminal again. Now we're going to start with our title, so I'll provide our title, and now let's say that our title is going to be Learn JavaScript. And then we can go ahead and specify that our content is going to be this is a JavaScript tutorial. So right here I can just come and say this is a JavaScript tutorial. And once I have this, then I can go ahead and also specify the author. So I'm going to specify the author as John Doe. Actually, I'm going to come here and I make this a string. So right here we can have a John Doe, who is the author of this post. So I'm going to close this. And once we have this with values, when we check form with values dot is bound, this will return true because now our form has values. So what you're going to do is also check another attribute. So the other attribute you're going to check for, or a function, is the dot is valid attribute. So right now we have form dot with values, and when you check form dot is valid, simply a function that returns true if this form is valid. In this case, it's going to return false because then we may have some of our content not being like the way we defined it. So let's go ahead and basically check out how we can create a valid form. So I can come and say valid form, and this is actually going to be a post creation form. And once here, we can even be able to provide some values. So for example, I can come and provide a title, and this title is going to be Learn Django Forms. And once we do this, then we can go ahead and also provide our content. So I can go ahead and provide our content. Now this content is actually going to be, let's say, we are going to actually provide our content as learn how to use, this is actually going to be learn how to use forms in Django. And once I provide this, and I'm also going to provide an author. And once we provide an author, so I'll say this is going to be Jen Doe. I'll close this. And once I've closed this, now we can come and call our valid form. And this is actually going to be a post creation form. So it's going to have valid equals to unknown, and then it's going to have the different fields such as title, content, and author. Now I want to access this form as a UL, or at least we can call methods such as, so we can come and say valid form dot as UL, and that's actually going to call a bound method onto this form. Now to call that method, we can actually just call it with this, and what it's going to do is going to print out the HTML that will be rendered in our form. Now if we wanted to render this as a paragraph, we may also call something like form valid form dot as p, meaning dot as paragraph, and what it is going to do is going to basically render all our fields as paragraphs. So if I call this, we now have a paragraph for the label of title as well as the input. Now we cannot be able to see this clearly, but this is actually the HTML that will be rendered once we render this form. Now you can also render this as tables. For example, you can come and say valid form, and when you call valid form, we can actually call dot as table, and what this does is going to render our form as a table. Now we've seen how we can be able to use these forms to collect data from our users. Now what if we wanted to render this in an HTML template? What we're going to do is to go back to our views.py, and then we're going to attach that specific view to a URL. So I'm going to close this for now, and what I'll do is to save our forms.py. So I'll go back to our urls.py within our posts app. So I changed quite a lot of things, but I'm sorry for that. I wasn't able to basically continue from where I stopped. So what I'm going to do is to create a URL pattern, and this is actually going to be for create post. Then we're going to actually visit our view. So I'm just going to attach this URL onto our view, and then it's going to be for create a post, and then I'll provide a name for that. So our name in this case is actually going to be create post. And once we have this, then I'm going to save, and I'm going to run our server again with Python 3 money.py, and then run server. So I'm going to control and click on this URL, and our project will open up in Chrome. So I actually even redesigned the whole front end. So what we need to do is to actually go, and actually what I'm going to do is to create another page or another template that's going to actually create a URL that's actually going to basically render this template. So I'm just going to come to our templates right here, and then I'll go to our base.html. Now within our base.html, I'm going to create another anchor tag within our header, and this is going to be responsible for taking us where we'll create a post. So I'm just going to come and say create post. So within here, I'll just come and say that we're going to have a URL, and then we shall call our post app. So in this case, when I go to our URLs, I'll simply call the URL for creating a post. Come and say create post. And once I have this, then when we go back to our UI right here, when I refresh, we have that extra URL for creating a post. Now, since we do not have, since we don't have any context, what we're going to do is to actually add, we have a join argument must be string, bytes, or path-like OS object, but not a dictionary. So what we're going to do is to go back and check where we went wrong. So I'm going to go within our views.py, and then within our, so what you have is this. So we have request, and then you have to render a template, which it did not actually specify. So I'm going to provide that template right here, and that template in this case is going to be for create post.html. So once I have this, I'm going to go ahead and save. Now when I save this, I'm going to go right in our templates and create that template where we're going to actually render our form. So I'm just going to go in our templates folder right here. I'll create a new file which I'll call create post.html. So after creating this create post.html, we have a base layout template that we actually inherit. So to inherit it, I'll call an extends tag, and after writing the extends tag, then I'll specify that we are extending our base.html. So I'll come and also provide our block tags that are going to help us to provide the content that's going to be on our page. So this block tag is actually block content and end block content. Now after doing this, I'm going to come and specify the content for this specific template. So I'm going to save this. Now when I go back to our UI and I refresh, right now we see that our page is being rendered. Now let's go ahead and render our form onto our UI. So basically what we need to do is to create a form tag. So we create a form with post. That's if we are going to create any sort of data or send in kind of data to our server. Now this form is not going to have an action for now, but it's going to have a method of post. And right within our form tag, what I'm going to do is to render our form. So since I'm using Django, I'll just come and say var, and then right here I'll provide our form. Now since our form is within our context, we can be able to actually use it here. So when I say form, I'm going to save, and when I save, I'm going to refresh, and now we can see that all our form fields are actually being rendered. Now let's go ahead and style this up. So to style that up, I'm going to go to our static, and what I'll do is to come right here and I'll come and say form, and then right here what we're going to do is to actually give it a margin top, and let's say we're going to say 100 pixels, forgive my CSS. So when I come right here, I'm going to refresh. Actually our styles are not showing, oh sorry for this. When I come right here and refresh, we now see that our form is now away from the top by 100 pixels. Now if you want to render this as a paragraph, what you can do is to actually come and say form dot as paragraph. So when I save this and refresh, we now see that each of the fields is rendered as a paragraph. Now if you want to render this as a table, what you can do is to call form dot as table. So when I refresh, we now see that each of our fields is being rendered as a column in a table. Now we can also render our fields as a UL or an unordered list. So when I save this and refresh, we now see that each of our fields is actually being rendered as a list. So let me add some margin there. So when I come right here, all I can do is to say margin, and this is going to be 20 pixels in our main.css file. So when I refresh, right here we can even see that all our fields are being rendered as list items. Now Django provides a way in which you can be able to submit these forms basing on the is bound or is valid attributes. So let's go ahead and do that. So what I can do is to basically style up our form. So what I'm going to come and do here is to basically provide an input of submit. So I'm just going to come right here and provide an input of type submit, and this is going to be a button that's going to allow us to submit data to our server and be able to do something. So I'm just going to come and say submit, and what I have is going to be our form, but in this case I'll actually render it as a paragraph and also add a simple h1 at the top right here. So I'm just going to call this create a post. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Now when I save that, I'm just going to come right here, and when I refresh, we now see that we have a simple form right here. So this form is actually not doing anything for now. When we try to submit, we actually see that it's required, so we can't actually submit it when it doesn't have any data. So what you can do in this case is to come and fill in a title. So when I come and fill in a title to be learn Django, and I can come and also give in our content. So I can just come and say this is going to be our content, and when you have the author, you can basically add in an author, and then I submit. Now this is actually going to throw for us this error. So this error is what we call the CSRF error, and this is a security risk that can make hackers submit data to our server without having to basically use our form. So Django provides for us a way we can be able to prevent this error or our server from being compromised by hackers sending invalid data from invalid forms to our server. So the way we can prevent this, just like we see here, is by adding this tag, which is the CSRF token template tag, inside of each of our post forms. So what I'm going to do is to add that tag. So I'll just come to our VS Code right here, and if I'm using Django, it's just a simple CSRF and then tab, and that will autocomplete for us the tag. So what we have is we can be able to submit this form, and it will be valid, and we shall be able to generate that specific CSRF token for each of our requests. Now when you go back right here, we can refresh, and when you try to send this, we actually see it's forbidden. So we can go ahead and refresh. So we can provide some more data. So we can go ahead and say this is land Django, and then I'll provide the content. So in this case, we're going to come and say this is content, and then right here I can provide an author, provide Sally Jonathan. So when I submit, we are actually going to basically post our form or submit our form without any errors. So now let's look at how we can be able to actually get this form from get this data from this form. So then we're going to get this data from this form. When we go to our views.py, that data comes as a result of our post request. Now remember, in our views and URLs tutorial, we actually looked at how we could get data within a GET request via our URL parameters. Now each and every time we actually submit a post, we send data with the request object that is stored within our post request. Now let's look at how we can be able to access that data. So what you can do is to come right here, and then you specify if the request method is post, then you can be able to actually access that data via that request.post. Now let's look at how we do that. So what I can do is to come right here and say if request, our request object, and you can specify if request.method is equal to post, and this is when we are submitting data from our front end or from our form to our server. So in this case, what we can do is to provide our data. Actually, I'm going to call this our data, and our data is going to be request.post. So right here we have our data, which is going to be request.post, and in this case, what I'm going to actually do is to just print this data out. And once we print this data out, I'm just going to simply come and redirect to the same page. Now the way we can do that is by using the shortcut of redirect, which is also provided to us by Django. So I'll just come at the top of our code right here, and I'll simply import our redirect shortcut. And after importing our redirect shortcut, now I'm just going to come right here, and I'll say return redirect. Now in this case, what I can do is to provide a URL or the name of a method that contains a URL to which we want to actually redirect to. So in this case, I'm actually just going to specify that we want to redirect to create post. Now after doing this, I am just going to simply come right in here on our form, and I'm going to try to submit some data. So in this case, I'll provide the title. So I'll say this is a title, and then I'll provide some content in here. So I'll say this is content and provide an author as well. So when I submit this form, when you go right here in our console, what you can actually see is we have a query dictionary, just like we saw for the GET request, and that query dictionary contains a CSRF token, which is this random string that's generated. We also have our title, we also have our content. Now in case we want to use our form to basically save this data or to our model, what you can actually do is to be able to access that data and then validate it with our form then use our form to basically go ahead and save this data. Now the way we can do that is by using the form itself, or we can use Django models. So I'm going to teach you how to use Django models in the next video, but for now we're actually going to use our forms to basically go ahead and save this data onto our database. So we are actually going to get our data from our form and then basically create a new post object, which is going to allow us to save that object into our database. Now what I'm going to come and do is to print. So right now I can say print data, and then I provide, let's say, a value, for example our title. I can as well provide our content, so I can come and say print data, and in this case we can go ahead and print our content, and then you can also go ahead and print our data, and then right here we can actually say we're going to print our data, and then you can say we're going to actually access our author. So this is actually going to print each kind of data we're going to send from our form at the front end. So when I come right in our terminal right here, when I save, our server is actually going to restart. So I'm going to head over to our front end right here. When I refresh, I'm actually going to minimize this a little bit. So when I come and provide a title, so I'm just going to come and say this is a title, and I'm going to come right here and provide some content and also provide an author. Now when we submit this, when you go back right here, what we actually have is that we are logging all the values of our fields as we get them from our form. Now this is important, as we're going to use this to create a new post object, which we shall then submit and then be able to create this on our database side. So to do that, I'm going to come right here. Now since we have these values, what I can do is to actually just assign them to variables. I can just come right here and say that we're going to have our title as data title, and then we shall have our content. So in this case, what I'm going to do is to say that we shall have our content, and this content is going to be data and then content. Then we can actually also go ahead and do the same thing here for our author. So I can say author is actually going to be data and then author. Now after doing this, what we can do is to actually go ahead and save a new post object. So the way we create a new post object is by saying new post, and then we're going to import our model. So I'll just come at the top right here and import our model. So I'll just come and say from dot models, or from our models module within the same directory. I am going to go ahead and import our post model. Now after importing our post model, the next thing is actually going to be using our post class to create this new post. Now I'm just going to come and say we're going to create a new post. This post is going to have attributes such as the title. In this case, our title is actually going to be the title as we've got it from our form. Now we're actually going to also consider our content, and our content is actually going to be our content from our form, and we're also going to have our author, and that is going to be the author from our form. Now after doing this, now we're just going to go ahead and save this new post object, just like we saw in our database models video. So I'm just going to come right here and say new post dot save. This will go ahead and save it in our database, and we are then going to redirect to our home page. Now in this case, we're going to actually redirect to our home page. Now I'm going to do that, so I'm going to get the name we actually gave to our view function that returns our home page. So I'll just go to our URLs right here, and it's called posts home. Now I'll just copy it right here, and once I have that, then I'm just going to come within our views.py. After successfully creating a post, we are actually going to redirect to our posts home. And now let's go ahead and test this. So when I go back to our Chrome right here, I'm going to provide a title. So let's say Django for beginners. And when I come to our content right here, I can say this is content. I provide an author. And when I submit, we now see that our post is created. So I'm going to go ahead and basically go to confirm whether that post has been created, because we have successfully redirected to our home page, meaning that our post has been created. So all I'll do is to go to our Django admin. So I'm just going to go to localhost 8000/admin, and on our admin dashboard right here, we are actually going to check for our post. So I'm just going to go to our post right here, and now we have our new post created, so which means that our form is working right now. So when you go back to our post, what I'm actually going to do is to make a query to our database to render our dynamic post from our database. Now to do this, I'm just going to go to that specific view function that's returning our posts. So instead of using this post, we're actually going to use actual posts from our database. Now I'm going to get rid of this post list right here. I'm actually just going to remove it. I'm just going to remove all this posts list, and after removing, I'm actually just going to get rid of it. Sorry for this. After getting rid of it, what I'm going to do is to query and then create a variable called posts that will contain a query set of all posts. Now to do that, I'll just come right here, and what I'll do is to say posts, and this post is going to be a post, and we are going to use Django to basically query just like we did in our models video. I'll just come and say post.objects.all. So this will return all posts as they are in our database. So when I save, and our server is going to refresh, that means we don't have any errors. So when you go back right here on our home page and refresh, we now see that we have posts as they are in our database. In this video, we've been able to briefly look at how we can use posts to be able to collect data from our users. We've also learned how these forms can be able to be validated, as well as how we can use them to create new data in our database. Thank you for watching, guys, and in the next video we shall be looking at model forms, and now we can use them to simplify the process of managing our data with both our forms and our models. Thank you for watching, guys, and see you in the next one. Bye.